Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Code Rage. My name is Ray Konopka. I'm going to share my screen and tell you everything you need to know about creating custom VCL styles. So let me go ahead and get this set up. VCL styles have been around for quite a while. And one of the things that there's a number of built-in styles that are available for Delphi for many versions now. I want to have a quick overview just to make sure we're all kind of on the right setup of what it means to style our applications. I am specifically talking about VCL styles as opposed to FMX styles. There is definitely overlap in concepts and functionality, but specifically we're talking about VCL styles because there's some nuances there. And then we want to really dig into what makes up a VCL style. What's its anatomy? What are the pieces and parts that define what this style looks like? Because one of the things we're going to find is as you dig more and more into it, and our applications want to support um, multiple new things that are happening on our system, specifically light and dark styles. We want to pick up what's in the operating system. We want to support high DPI as well as traditional DPI. All of these are considerations that we have to be aware of. So we're going to spend a good amount of time learning about the tooling that we have available to make these changes. I'll also present specific customization process details, like what are the steps that we need to do in order to customize a style. Along the way, I'm going to describe why we would want to create a custom style, what are things that we would be trying to address and overcome as we look at this. But a lot of it's really going to be the various customizations we can do. We're going to talk about customizing colors, simple element customizations. We're going to talk about complex customizations, all the way down to if you wanted to create a completely brand new style, what do you need to do? What are all the pieces? And so we're going to go through all of that and wrap up this whole session with a number of tips and strategies to wrap it all together so that we can really have some really cool styles for what we would need. And the guiding principle for all of this, kind of this particular example, is really if we're looking at it from an enterprise point of view, how are we connecting that to our enterprise applications? And we can start talking about, oh, okay, we want to brand it for our division, or we want to provide a little bit more detail and in control over our common look and feel across our enterprise applications. A style is a very good way to do that. So digging in, first and foremost, this should be a quick review to most Delphi developers. If you haven't seen it in a while, we're going to do a really quick update on how do we apply a VCL style to our application. And so it's done through the project options. There's a special page that lets us set this up. And we'll look at that in just a moment. The next step in continuing with this is we want to be able to dynamically change the style. That's really where the fun is, especially if you want to now support light and dark styles. So in traditionally when VCL styles first came out, it was very common to have just one style that you would embed into your application, and that's the way your app looked like. Well, but now it's very common to support both a light and a corresponding dark. So that's also one of the things we're going to run into with a lot of the pre-built styles that come with Delphi. they they don't have a corresponding pair. There's one, which, to be honest, I don't think is that great. So that was one of my motivations for going down this whole path, was to provide a consistent theming, light and dark, that we can leverage in our own apps. Very much like what Delphi does for its own IDE. So being able to dynamically change it, adapt to it, these are all things built into the VCL themes unit, the style manager. We can get a list of style names. We can iterate over that. We can provide a way to dynamically change it using the set style method. And we'll look at each of these very quickly. So let's do that now. So I'm going to switch over to, I am running the latest version of Studio, specifically Delphi. Same principles apply to C++ Builder if you're using that. What I have here is a pretty standard basic application. It's not really doing any real use other than showing a bunch of different control elements. Check boxes, radio bus, combo boxes, search edits, list boxes, data aware controls, all of these different things. So we want to make sure that when we set up our style, that are we picking up all of the right elements? Do all of our control elements get the right presentation when we switch to the style? Now, so if I run this very quickly, what we were going to see is it's a traditional Windows 11 app. This is my standard title bar that's defined in Windows 11. Yours might be red or blue and so forth. But the menus are the standard Windows menus and so forth. So, and then the compose button brings up a dialog. That's going to be important for one of the things we're going to talk about. And the open button opens up the Windows common open dialog. So nothing's shocking there. But let's style this. How do we do this very quickly? We go to the project options and select the appearance page. So under application appearance, we get a list of styles and a couple quick notes to talk about this list. You will note that there's multiple sections. So you will have at least on your systems Embarcadero Technologies high DPI optimized or the non high DPI, and then you may have a vendor version one if you've downloaded any other custom ones. Um, we're going to be showing, I'm going to add one to this. We're going to show a little bit more about this in a bit. But one thing to note, if you're doing anything new, you probably want to stick with the high DPI optimized. And we'll dig deeper into that as the session goes on and why this is important. But basically, this means is that the assets in each of these styles have been designed to support high DPI displays should your application be running on them. The ones that are in the non high DPI version are the older styles, one of the original sets that were there. They still work, but they're not going to work as well when you go running on a high DPI system if you've also changed your application to support high DPI. So that's a caveat to remember. We're going to be focusing on the high DPI side of it. And all we do is we're going to pick a number of styles. So the Classicos are quite nice. We're going to base one off of that a little bit later. You might want to bring in some of the tablet ones, which are styled a little different. You can highlight any of the styles and click preview and get an idea of what it looks like. And so we can see these buttons have a bluer color, and we can get just a sample of it. If we wanted tablet light and dark is in there, you can bring in, Windows 11 styles, which is what's been made up to kind of mimic what is in Windows 11. It's not completely accurate, but it's close. So we'll take a closer look later. All right, so I have enough set, and then down in the default style, this tells us how the application is going to start up. If you wanted to start up as regular Windows, you just pick Windows, which is always available. I'm going to say I'll start with the Iceberg Classico. We'll start with that one. So I'll go ahead and save this, run this real quick, and we will see that our app starts up in the Iceberg Classical style. So it's kind of a teal based look. We've got the compose button. Um, it comes up in that same style. So all of the dialogues pick up the styling that was defined. Our menus now look like, they've been customized, all the list boxes, tab controls, and so forth. So actually works quite well. So that's very simply what we need to support for doing the styles. Now, there's more that we can do. One of the things that we may want to do is, well, what if I wanted that dialogue, the composed dialogue, to be a different style? Well, you can actually do that by setting the style name on the form, and I'm going to change it to be the Lavender Classico. So same family, but I want this to actually look a little bit different. You may or may not want to do this. It's up to you. But if I go ahead and click compose, now I can see that my dialogue is picking up a different style. Would you want to do this with dramatically different styles? No, probably not. But it's quite possible you could have a customized version that was subtly different. It would give context to the user, and it does make it quite possible. Now, the challenge you have is, well, what happens if I bring up the open dialogue? I've still got this. Now, again, there's a couple things to know. One, it's picked up the style, so it looks like the Iceberg Classico, but it's also the old style open dialogue. Well, two things. What if I wanted this to be the lavender style, like all the other dialogues? That's one possibility. The second is, well, what if I want this to actually be the default Windows, the new, Windows 10 on up common dialogue? We can do both. And so let's take a look at what we need to do for those. So I'm going to switch back to my slides real quick and just briefly talk about some of the things that we can change here. Is we have a dialogue style name. So this we can set up ahead of time saying all of the common dialogues will use this particular style name. There's also times where you may want your application to be running with the regular Windows style, no matter how the user has set it up to be, but you want to style individual elements or controls on your form. And this is something that's relatively new, the last couple of versions, where there's per control styling that's available. So we can actually say the app looks like a regular Windows app, but this particular button control, we want to pick up a new style. And we can also do that. And then in the code, I'll show more about what form border style and system hooks allow us to do. So let me switch back over to our little sample app here. I'll close this down, go back to my Rad Studio here, go into the code. And what we can see is there isn't a whole lot that goes to this app. There's a bunch of controls, of course, but in the form create, which we haven't, I'll only run that real quick because I haven't really shown that once it's running in the style. I'm populating a combo box with all the different styles in it. So if I did want to change this to be the Slate Classico, you can do that. I can make everything look lavender. This is the tablet dark if we wanted to do that. But let me go back. And the create straight Windows looks like a regular Windows app. There's no VCL styling. So let me go back to Iceberg if that's what I wanted. So to populate that combo box, you just iterate over the style manager's style names array and you'll get back. We can populate the style name strings and throw them into a combo box. We highlight the one that's currently active because we have an active style that's in the style manager. That sets the stage. When it comes time to change it, when you change in the combo box, you just call set style. No big deal. Now, if I wanted all of my common dialogues to use that Lavender Classico style, you would change the style manager's dialogue style name. If I go ahead and run this very quickly, what we'll see is it comes up in Iceberg Classico, but when I open up the dialogue, it's now the Lavender Classico, which matches the composed dialogue that I've changed. Maybe that's what you want. If you want the if you don't want to use the styled common dialogues, you can remove the shell's dialogues, the system hooks entry from the system hooks. And what this will do is the opposite of what I was saying. This will actually make the dialogue look like a regular Windows common dialogue. Now, the caveat to that is it's a Windows common dialogue. It's going to pick up whatever default Windows style is currently active, light or dark, etc. But depending on what you want, you have that level of control. Another case of where this system hooks can come into play is whether we want menus to be styled or tooltips. So you can have some fun playing around with those. We're going to just bring that back. The border style, there's a couple different ways. If you wanted to remove the border element from the style elements property, that's the same as actually setting to be the system style, which where this is interesting is when you go and run your application, you will see that, and it should show up here, is that there's no fancy effects on the window. If I change this to Windows, you can see now we have the drop shadow that comes into play. And you lose that when you pick the VCL style and include the bordering of the window. And so if you want that artifacts, you can switch back and take that off and then it won't theme the outside of the window, only the client area. So let me move on some more so I don't run out of time, because we really want to get into the creation and what are the pieces that make up the style. But it's important to understand all these aspects of the style because it does affect how you create it and what you want to do. So, where we do all of our work is in the Bitmap Style Designer, and it's an external tool. It's a standalone app that we can actually edit both VCL and FMX styles. A VCL style is composed of five main sections. You have the objects, these are the definitions of the various control elements used in the VCL to define how we render a control's appearance. Well, then we also have the set of images. So these are the source assets that provide a good chunk, if not all, of the look of a particular object. So we're going to have a set of source images. We're going to have a set of, a definition of various objects, and they're going to connect to each other. We'll see how we do that. And then additionally, we have fonts, colors, and system colors, which are all extra definitions. They're all really color values of how does the particular element look, because it's one thing to have the source images present how the control looks, but there's a lot of times programmatically we need to understand what that color should be. For example, we've all used seal button face, for example, which is the default background color of a form in Delphi. Well, if we're going to apply a VCL style like Iceberg Classico, which is kind of a teal color, well, seal button face, if I was to programmatically want to get that, I need to know what that is. So that's where sys colors, for example, comes into play. And we're going to see all of this in detail as we step through each of these pieces. So the customization process itself is pretty straightforward depending on the level of customizations you want to do. Um, you almost always are going to start with, well, you're not going to have to create all the objects and pieces yourself. You're going to start with an existing style, which is the easiest, or you create a new one within the Bitmap Style Designer, and it has all the default object values already in there, at least as a starting point. And then it becomes a matter of tweaking those. But we're going to update the author information, the style name. We want to do that right away because the way in which Delphi, the IDE, picks up a new style, we need to have this unique so we can identify the one we're working with and not collide with something else. And that's done in the style name setting. Then we go and we learn all about how do we customize the various elements. The simple is to update the source images. Then we can dig deeper into the coloring. And then if we really want to tweak things up, we actually can modify the objects. And we're going to cover all of those. Save your style, add it. Once we save it and we know where to save it, then it's going to automatically show up in the IDE for us to select. So pretty straightforward. So how do we pick a base style? Well, typically you would select the one that uh, the set of styles that's in your version of the Delphi IDE. They are version specific. They're not really, but there's newer stuff. So I would pick your highest version of Delphi and use that one as your base for creating it. Hopefully everybody here has got, Delphi 11. Great. You'd be using it under version 22 for the set of styles. And you can pick one of those as your starting point. That's what we're going to do in just a minute. I highly recommend picking a high DPI style as your starting point if you're going to switch it over, rather than pick one of the older ones, only because it already has the placeholders for the high DPI support. And ultimately, we're going to want to support that. So better to do that now when you're getting started rather than try to add that to a style later on. Um, these are a list of the high DPI styles. All of those are fine to start with. I will say I would not recommend the Windows 10 styles. They're really kind of Windows 10 mobile styles. So everything's a little bit larger than it probably is needed. It has some design specifications. The coloring is very high contrast because of what the kind of motivation was when it first came out. It does not match the default Windows 10 desktop style that you probably are running. So hence, I wouldn't recommend that. The Windows 11 ones are kind of okay, but to be honest, I'm not that impressed with some of the graphics elements of each of the control pieces. And some of this comes from what the style can do, a VCL style can do, but also some of it comes from Windows 11 default style by Microsoft is a little odd, to be totally honest. I mean, it's very washed out. They don't have a lot of contrast in certain areas. So pick it if you would like it. That's the beauty of this is we can pick and choose. And if we want to change it, we can change it. So updating the source images, this has the biggest impact on the appearance of your style because if even Windows itself operates like this, like pretty much every OS, whether it's iOS, Android, Mac, there's a set of source images that provide the control rendering that is used to present controls. So, for example, a button, there's the various button images, a push button states. You have the hover, the normal, the push down, the disabled. So, you have a set of those. And using a technique called image slicing, which we'll talk later, these image assets can be resized to present any size button that's on the control. So obviously changing that source image has a huge impact on the style. Um, you can have a style itself, a VCL style file that represents the style can contain any number of images. You could have literally a separate image file for each control element in your style. You probably don't want to do that because there's a lot of relationships between them. Like you have different states of a push button, as I said, the same thing with checkboxes. You have a lot of controls that look very similar, like having a list box versus a memo versus an edit of list view, tree view. Well, they probably should be very similar. You don't want to have separate files because managing that becomes a little unwieldy. You do, since we're talking high DPIs, we do want to support multiple object resolutions. So, and scaling. So, for a particular style object, we're going to have a 100% version, a 150% version, and a 200% version. And that means we need to take that into account in our source images. Some control elements need to be able to scale, others can just get resized automatically. Personally, every control element in a VCL style should be scaled accordingly, but it doesn't work that way. Only certain graphic elements are actually get scaled with the DPI setting. And we're going to go through all of those. All right. So what we want to do now is I'm going to walk through a live conversion demonstration of creating a style. We're going to customize one that's existing, but update all the coloring, and it's going to cover a lot of what we want to cover. So let me switch back. We got any questions? Everything good? I think we're fine. All right. So we're going to come back here. To start with is I'm going to bring up the Bitmap Style Designer. We can do this through the tools menu. We can get to the Bitmap Style Designer. I've been doing it so much, I have it down on my taskbar. And so let me go and get rid of the background so it's a little easier to see. Unfortunately, we can't increase the size of this, so hopefully this is showing up okay. But what I want to do is, by default, you get an untitled VCL style file, which is the VSF extension. I'm going to click open and it should default to the same directory I referenced before. So these are the standard ones based on the version of the style designer we loaded up. I'm going to pick the Slate Classico as my default. That's what I'm going to base it off of. So, because I want it generally to look just like that, but I don't like the colors. And as you might see from my example here, I've been tasked with, I've got a client that, I want to make some, it's a floral shop. So I want to have a special VCL style for this application that they use to support their orders or whatever it might be. So I'm going to build up a kind of a nice little style. So first thing that I want to do is I've loaded up the Slate Classico, but I'm going to immediately save this as a different file, and I can put it in the same spot. So I'm going to call this Floral Shop Classico and go ahead and save that. And then the next step is I want to update the author information, only because if I don't and I try to use it or see it, it's not going to come up right. So the key, there's, you can go ahead and change these elements if you want. They're not as important. The author is, because that shows up how it shows up in the list. So it's not really an Embarcadero style. So I would change it. And then I'm going to change the style name, which is what we want. So this is the Floral Shop Classico, and once we do that, go ahead and click OK. One little note, if you close the editor and open this back up and reload the floral shop or any other style, mostly the ones that you build or someone else, this may still show Embarcadero. When that happens, you just have to click on another node in the tree and come back, and then it should refresh itself and show you the right value. Just don't get confused if you see that happen. So we're talking about changing the coloring, the source images. So if you go into the images and open this up and click on style, we can see all of the different pieces that make up this style. And this should look familiar. When we ran our application that was running with the Iceberg Classical, these were all teal. I switched to the slate one, they're gray, but you can see all the different control elements. And then this 15x and 20x are taking a subset of these, like the check boxes and radio buttons, the thumbs of the track bar and the menu icons and glyphs, and has resized those to 150% of the source. The 20x is double the size. So, to do the high DPI correctly, we need to have these extra elements in there. So what I'm going to do just to do the coloring is I want to export each of these images out. And I'm going to export them to my graphics folder, conferences, sessions, VCL styles. And I'm going to pick that folder and then export. And what that's doing is, it is kind of weird. It's not just exporting this file, it exports all the images that are inside of the tree. So I just need to do it once. I'm going to keep this here. And unfortunately, I am going to go back over to this side, which may be a little bit higher. Let me minimize that and bring up my Finder. And these are the same files that I just exported. And that's because my graphic tool is over on my Mac side and I'm using Photoshop. You can use any graphics program that you want. This is fortunate. I can actually make this bigger so that we can see what this looks like. So this is the same PNG image, but as a PNG, I'm going to make some changes to it. The other ones are over in here that I can make bigger. Don't worry about the details. I'm just going to do a couple quick tweaks in here, which is image adjustments and the hue saturation. And I'm going to change my hue to be 57, which is going to make these various control elements purple. And then I'm going to go into the photo filter and change this to a violet filter, which is going to tweak all the grays to be a light violet color. So kind of makes that floral shop vibe. I got green showing up. I've got some purple, and I'm going to do the exact same things over on this side. And again, you can customize the coloring and the changing all you want. The couple things to remember is, whatever you do to the one image, you want to make sure you do to all of them so that it's consistent. So I don't want to forget doing the violet filter. And then the last one here, image adjustments, hue saturation, 57. And then finally, the photo filter, pick up the violet. If you wanted to go more detailed, things to watch for where it gets a little bit more of a challenge. If you wanted to change border colors, that becomes more of a challenge in modifying the PNG images themselves. only because there's blending that's going on in the PNG and it's not really the original source material. You really kind of want to do this with a vector source, which is what we'll be talking about toward the end of the session here. So really quickly, now that I've made my changes, let me go and save each of these files. So each one's getting saved, and I think this is the last that I'll be over here till the very end. So let me go back into Windows that has the higher res. So we're good. Now that I've updated these, I need to update my source. I need to bring them back into the style file. Well, what I do is I pick which style image I want and then click update. And it's going to navigate. I've already was out here before running through this. So I'm going to pick this from my export. Um, oh, I didn't put it down into the bottom, but that's fine. This is where it is. Here's the purple one. Go ahead and click OK because I just did that. This is giving you kind of a preview with it masked out since it is a PNG, so the transparent regions show up. So I'm not going to tweak it or do anything. I'm just going to say, okay, now that's picked up that version. And I do now have to do it for each of these. So I'm going to pick up this one and then finally pick up the last one that's there. And so now I've got all three of my source images are updated. I'm going to save my file and let's try it out. And we can do that using the test style button in this designer. So when I bring this up, it brings up a sample form that applies my new style. So here's my new buttons, the edits are there, the combo box is all styled. You know, it's pretty good. Most everything is there. um, there's some gray that's showing up here. So there's some things that we want to watch. Here's the menu. The menu's got a nice green on it, so not too bad. Let me go back to my slides, and we'll cover, take a look at some of the. We're not done yet, is really what I'm getting to. So let me go back to where's my conference sessions. Show this. All right, let me navigate through this real quick. All right, did the customization process, our support images, we did that. So one of the things we have to worry about is the colors. That's the next step. We did the source images; those are pretty good. But we're going to take a closer look into what kind of impact the colors have in the style, the color settings, and we'll look at those. But some important ones are the CL button face and highlight, the button focused, hot, and pressed colors, because those actually get used in other ways in by the controls, not just rendering the images. So let me go back and switch to my desktop here. So we go back to this. Let me close this down and bring back my style designer. So if we go and run, I should have kept that up. You can notice, being very nitpicky, there's some gray here. There's actually some gray around the elements there. If we click on other controls, we can see, oh, there's this gold. Where's that coming from? There's all this gray that's behind the action bars here. The scroll box has gray in it. Um, the grids are kind of weird. These don't pick up. Why do these look different from those? Category panels are kind of inconsistent. Win32 control is not bad, but you got, again, more grays coming in here. So what did we miss is really what the key is. Well, one way to support, to determine that is I've created, and I'm going to run another instance of the Bitmap Style Designer, which is kind of nice. I can run two of them. By going and picking this up, I'm going to go and load up another style that I had created, and I have a shortcut to get me there, and it's called Color Impact. And Color Impact, what it does is, here's that thing where it shows Embarcadero Technologies, but if I click away and open it, oh, I guess I didn't update that. I updated that in the name. My bad. Uh, Inside of each of these properties, these nodes in the tree, you get a list of all the colors that are used. Specifically, what I've gone in and as I've tweaked all the colors so they're as different as I could make them. so that we can see the impact of, well, where does the list view or the list box or the grids come in? How are they being used as these static color constants? Same thing with the system color. So CL button face, where does that show up? Well, it shows up when we go and run the preview of this form, which is the same classic Slate Classico, but now we can see, oh, this is the CL button face. That's in, oh, here's the version for the list or the memo, which is up elsewhere. And then we've got coloring that's around here. There's things around the edits don't go, they go to the edge of the border, but the combo boxes don't because they're drawn differently. You can go through here. This is one of my favorites. You got all these, it's a rainbow of all kinds of colors, which is nice because when you're building a new style, like if you want to change the colors, you got to make sure and you're changing all the right values. So you can, this is included in the source material with this, load this up, have fun, get an idea of where various colors are coming from. And then we can see an impact of it, which is quite nice. So I know that the CL button face, for example, if I go in and change it, then it's just you pick it and then click select. And then if I made that like bright red, something very different, and then rerun it, then we'll see that like, oh yeah, there's the bright red that's showing up on all of those. So if we don't want that to show up, then we want to make sure that CL button face is set to be like whatever our background color is. So with this new knowledge, let's go and update our style because we do have that gap. As we said, when we run it, we've got this is gray, um, and the additional page has a lot of other stuff. So very quickly, I'm going to go into the sys color ones. And I'm not going to do all of them. I just do a couple so you get an idea because I want to cover more material. But I'm going to pick CL button face and change this value to 227, 218, and 240. Go ahead and click that. So that's going to change that. And then I want to change the CL highlight because that's a pickup from the old Classico style, the slate one. So I need to change that to 165, 232, to 143. And click that. So one's a light purple, one's a light green. Now I'll go ahead and save that, run this. And what we'll see is that like, oh, that background blends in with the rest. There's no bordering around the scroll bars. If I go to the additional page, it's like, oh, okay, that tab, that color is now green, which may be what I want. Again, you can change that, tweak it. Again, other color values would change the scroll box background, etc. Notice that our background of here, that was based off the CL button face. So now that looks good that we've picked that up. So pretty cool. All right, let me go back. Next section is we want to start talking about these objects because this is really where it starts to get complicated. And I haven't even opened up the objects node yet, but we've done quite a bit of customizations. The individual styles and colors obviously get the look and feel, or the look of the appearance. But what if we want to change something more dramatic? Um, each of the various elements has properties very similar to components because that's how they're based off of, and we want to be able to change those to make some changes. And specifically, the example I'm going to show is I want to make the title bar bigger. So it was specifically the buttons because the buttons are really old school, like old Windows, where they were close together. And to be honest, I've gotten much used to the big buttons, so I want to change that to match. And one nice way to do something like that is to use another style as a reference if you have it. And for what we're about to do, I don't want to save that. I'm going to load up the Windows 11 only because I know that one has the larger spacing between the various buttons. So we're going to use that as a book or a placeholder. I'm going to go ahead and close this down. And where we want to look at, I don't need it this big, is we want to go into the objects now. So the objects is a property tree of various things. We're going to be looking at the form, and again, you just kind of got to go through and figure out which pieces is which. Most everything is going to be identified by what its element is, what it's representing. So the image is kind of bad. It represents the background image that's being used for it, but the style itself is made up of various pieces for a form. So you've got a left border, for example, the right border is here, and we can see there's dimensionality that's tied to that. I'm specifically looking at the title. And so what I want the title to be is something different. So if I find the same title over in here. The title on my Windows 11 one is 32. Mine's set to 29. So let me go ahead and change this to 32. And when I do that, take a look at what happens over in the preview here. That the title boundary now is creeping into the client area. Well, I don't want that. So I need to kind of fix that. So the next thing is I want to go to the client and see what did I do with the client. Oh, well, the client starts lower. You know, its height is 212, starts at 32. The windows are this, well, almost the same height, you know, or the width. The height is, you can find that's 215, that's 212, that's for the client area. So I'm going to make this match to be the same. It's close enough to what we want, and make this third. See, you can tell now that we've gone up, so it needs to kind of fill that gap. That purple is the background, like there's nothing there, so you wouldn't want to do that because there nothing would be covering that element when the control would be rendered. So by pushing the top down, now it's within the border that I've set up, and I can go open up the title. Now the title is made up of a bunch of different things. It has a caption. And so I'm going to increase the height of my caption a little bit. So I can make this 31. I want to do that because I want bigger buttons and things. Actually, I'm going to make that a little bit shorter, make that 30. So that's not creeping down. But now the next step is I want to fix these buttons. These buttons are all close together. How do I get them spaced out nicely? Well, we open up the caption, which has a caption left, little buffer, has the system menu that's in there, has system buttons. I'm going to open up the system buttons and we see all of these different pieces. And here's our first impression of uh, basically 100% controls. So these are the non-scaled ones. There's the 150% ones. So button close at 150%, so forth. Each of these buttons has different image assets that it can pick up. And well, I can do it right now. If I go and click on, double click and bring this up, here's our source image of the set that we have. And I'm going to zoom this in. Let me make this bigger so we can see. And then we can see that for this particular control, that X that's in there is coming from this bounded region extracted out of our source image. And if we go, each of these different states goes to a different piece in the file. And as you can imagine, without any guides or anything, it's kind of tricky to, we don't want to be changing these because it's going to impact how it looks. Like if this isn't the X isn't the exact same spot in this bounding rectangle from the various states, they're going to shift as the control changes states. I'll have a technique to help do that in just a minute or two. So the but I don't care about the image. The image is fine for what I want. I'm really concerned about the size. So for this particular change, I want the images to be 46. I want the buttons to be 46 wide. So if I go to this side, I can see it's 46, and then the left is 254. And so I want to do the same thing. So for this image, I'm going to make it 254, and we can see impact. Let me make this, get back. I need some more room. There we go. And then pick the next one. So the max one, they're all going to be 46, but this one is 210. So change this to 46. Update this to 210. And of course, if I didn't have a source one, you could just change this and guide it as to what, what you think is going to fit. I'm just trying to do this more quickly so we can get through it. But I wanted to show you the different kind of the level of detail in which you need to kind of go through all of this. And this is just a fraction of what you might change on a brand new style. So let me go to the min. So 46 and the 122, and then skip, because again, sometimes the order is completely nonsensical. There's no structure to it. It's another thing that I would fix in doing a new style is make them all easier to get to. Um, doesn't really matter because it's just the style engine just pulls up the identifier looking for button help. So 46 for this one, and change this to 78. So now I've got my space buttons. Great. Let me save the style, go ahead and run it. And we can see that the height of my title bar is indeed bigger than it was before. And I've got the spacing between each of the style elements. So really powerful once you dig into the little details of each of those. I didn't show it. I'll just kind of drill a little deeper, but like for the 150% ones, if we go to those bitmaps for those images, notice that the source image is the 150% version of the source image, not the style image. So that's how it pulls up the right source material, because you want it to scale and be nice and clean and not rasterized when you're increasing the size. So let me switch over, cover a couple more things, some complex customizations. Um, One of the things, if you really want to create custom and not base off one that exists, you're going to want to create your own source images. So to do that, that's a great time to redo the organization. As you noticed, the source image that's in here, this all over the place. I mean, they're kind of grouped, but you've got things like these are the tool forms that correspond with the main forms. They're in a different spot. It's kind of weird. They're all over the place. We can do something to fix that. You just have to go back in and select all the bounds for the various controls. Again, that is rather tedious. Um, I would recommend using vector artwork to do this and generate PNGs from the vector artwork, so that if you do need to make a change, you're not having to modify PNG work, especially if you want to change the border color and so forth. And in another minute or two, I'll show an example of what that looks like. And then if you change the new source images, you have to go through and change those bounds for each of the images. And I already showed the zoom feature to do that. You want to zoom in and click it. I will say that it is rather cumbersome, because the zoom feature, if we go back to say the button close and click on the active bitmap, depending on the scaling, like if we go up to the 800, and if you scroll around, it gets distorted sometimes. It doesn't always keep it nice and square, but typically it'll fix itself once you click once. And so it's a left click sets the upper left, and the right click sets the lower right. And so that's how you define that. It'd be nice if you could type into here and actually have it change it, but that doesn't work. You have to use the mouse. So you would click on things. If it's got a border, it's a lot easier to pick, but clicking this, I already know that's not what it was. And then doing it on a different view and making sure they're in sync can be challenging. I'm going to cancel this. One way that I've done to get around that is in my source material. This is from a new style that I've been working on. I'll show in a sec, but these are all vector objects, and I have it structured all in the right. And one of the things I added is a set of guides. So for anything that doesn't have a clear border, or if I want padding on it to give it spacing, I put guides up. I generate the PNG image with the guides. This is actually better if I do it over on the glyphs side of it. Here's all the things. So all the little glyph images, buttons that have, that are hot tracking, so they don't have it in the regular states. I export those out, load those up first, and then use that to drive my bounds. Then I save the style, generate the PNG image again without the guides, and then we'll just load it up. I don't have to reselect the regions of each style element. It just works. So that works out quite powerfully to do that. What's nice is that by doing it vector, if I need to tweak it, I can go into a particular control element, like I was talking about the borders. If I wanted to go into a particular control, I can change the stroke color that's used on it to pick up a different value. If I needed to make it, purple or whatever, I can do that across my whole thing. Notice that the blending between that, the anti-aliasing picks up the purple hues. That's really difficult to do directly editing a PNG file, if not impossible. So if you want that level of detail, you're not going to want to go down that road. All right, let me go back to here, wrap up a couple more tips. If you are doing with curves, like buttons have curved corners typically, you have to take into consideration image slicing, which is how Windows and iOS and all these operating systems resize a bitmap image to fit a resizable area. They cut the image into 9 sections and they stretch it depending on which point. The corners never get changed, so they're always in the right, they're displayed as is. The top and bottom are stretched horizontally, so they're tiled horizontally, but the height doesn't change. Opposite for this left and right, and the middle area is stretched to fill the whole thing. And it gives you a nice way to do that. The one downside of this approach is that bordering does not get resized. This is one of the reasons why Windows in high DPI looks so washed out, because borders that are 1 pixel wide on a 96 DPI system are only 1 pixel wide on a 192 DPI system, high DPI. It really should be 2. Now, where we need to be concerned with is if you're going to have curves, as you do the high DPI versions of it, the 150 and the 200 scale, you should be changing the border width, because like if this is a checkbox, the border width does grow. So you want to make sure that gets scaled. And the curvature, if the pixels are 4 at 150, the pixels need to be 6 for the curvature. And if it's 200, it needs to be 8. Otherwise, it won't keep the same relative shape as you go to the high DPI system. So I just hit all of those. These are the same things to remember. And I pretty much just showed this. Let me load it up real quick. I got like another couple of minutes. I like to get a couple questions in, but let me go and switch back to the style designer. I'm going to go ahead and open. Let me go to Ray Styles. As you can see, we have a bunch cooking up. This isn't released yet, but it will be soon. And so in here, we got basically it's a kind of a newer style. It's got the same kind of inputs, but what's nice is everything is hot tracked. Everything is fully theme supported for the VCL style. So you've got the hot tracking, the buttons, menus, and so forth. All these different elements. All the grids work correctly, so all those style colors are set right. It's really the one big thing is that the check boxes and radio buttons are extremely clear and easy to see. They're rather distorted in Windows 11. So again, you can definitely do all of this. It does take some time. There are some vendors out there that do provide custom styles, which you may want to look at doing as well. But that is what I have today. All the materials, the sample, the color impact style, and the floral shop one is all available in the downloads on my Delphi by Design blog. And that's it. I was speaking very fast. Hopefully the international people could keep up with that one. Sorry about that.
Okay. I was following along. But yeah, that's a good point about the international people. Hopefully they follow along as well. I put the link in for Delphi by Design in the chat for everybody if they want to go out and
Oh, that's
download.
awesome. Thank you.
And so is the slides and the code were all on there?
The code is on there. I will make the slides available as well, but that's a good point.
There was a question about that. Ian says, that was great. Thank you. And yes, there'll be a replay available as well. Any other
Awesome.
questions for Ray going forward here?
Oh, Martha's giving us some time for some Q&A. That's great.
Yeah.
If
Do
anybody has any
you
questions. And
So I know you were covering VCL style specifically here, but how different is the in broad strokes working with Fire Monkey styles versus VCL styles?
well, in a lot of ways, they're very similar. However, there are a couple things to where if you generate a new FMX style, you get different object elements that are created because the in the eh, because FMX is actually originally designed to support styles by default. And
Mhm.
so there's more of a rigorous definition of what it means to be a style. The names are a little bit more consistent in, whether it's called background. Well, the background represents the background of that control element. So you'll notice that the object styles are a little different. The images are the same. They can be nearly the same. The way you pick the various elements is the same because it's the same object. Like when you picked on that button close, that was a style button. That's the component type that it is. Well, that's the
Mhm.
same on an FMX style, but the name of it, the identifier in the tree and how it gets loaded up will work. So so that's one big difference that you have in there. The second is the color constants. There's a few more that are Fire Monkey related that show up in an FMX
Mhm.
style, but that's the general high level difference between the two.
And there's another question here. If you're having any plans to write another book specifically about styles.
Well, styles and components, that's the thing is they're all very related, and I kind of, I've schedule notwithstanding, I would love to do that or do something more. So it is something that I've been kind of thinking more and more about. How do I do something like that? Producing a whole book at one time becomes a little bit more of a challenge, but now I'm kind of thinking maybe it's more of a guide, a set of guides. It's kind of maybe it doesn't have to be the whole big volume tome of everything related to component building, but maybe how the book was broken up into parts. Maybe I can do that as an easier way to hit that. So
That's a good idea.
uh,
Yeah, you could. Yeah, makes it very easy. And then there's a question here. Does styling apply to user-defined components as well? I may have missed how the identifier for VCL style design is assigned.
So it's a great question because it kind of depends on the component. Because this is where it's a little bit different. Where in the FMX world, it's every component kind of has to know what it means to be styled. That's not necessarily the case when it comes to a VCL control, because a VCL control could be completely custom, where they could be doing all the rendering themselves and not care about style. However, what they will care about are those system color constants. So that's why it's important to set the seal button face to be what the background color you want that to be, because a component vendor who's not using the styles might do that. Now, with respect to those vendors that do understand VCL styles and reckon it, they're using the style engine in order to render themselves. They the the individual elements that you see inside of the style objects aren't directly mapped. You don't load those up directly. You load them up via an enum. So you have a theme, an element details, and you set up a property or two in there to determine, oh, I want the push buttons down state. And I load that element detail and I use the style manager's drawing routine to actually render what that state looks like, giving it a bounding rectangle.
Mhm.
So that will pick up all of the changes that are inside of it. Where it's a little bit difficult is if you're a vendor and you have a component that doesn't really map to one of the style elements that are in there by default that Windows gives you or VCL wraps to, you might
Mhm.
have to build up your own as a combination of things, or pick a color from one style element but draw it as another. There's all kinds of fun stuff you can do.
Yeah, yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. That's kind of what I was thinking too. Is that it would seem like, yeah, you'd probably have to go out and try and do that. So I guess the short answer is, if you set your style up with the constants, it should have minimum support, but really depends on the custom component implementer. All
But they
right.
should all work. The technique that I showed is the same technique that all the standard VCL styles are made with. It's just they're leveraging, an original bitmap image and reselecting things and kind of tweaking it, where I wanted to make one completely from scratch because I wanted to reorganize it. I wanted to share things across. I wanted to make sure that was sourcing with vectors so that I could tweak the coloring. Because I don't know if you picked it up in the dialogue. There's the raised frost and raised graphite. Graphite is the dark style that matches, but I have colors of each one of those. So there's the rainbow of colors. There's 16 of them that are total that'll be coming out in
Mhm.
a package. So not quite launched yet, but very very soon now.
Now, is that going to be a commercial component suite or package,
Yep,
or what is that going to be? Okay, cool. And that'll be on your Delphi by Design
Ray software side.
Ray software. Okay, cool. Well, I will definitely be looking forward to that. You always do such great, amazing work. So,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
all
I
right.
do apologize for we ran long. Trying to squeeze a lot in there, but if anybody has any follow-up questions, I don't know if I can answer them via the chat for a few minutes more while the next session's going, or I will certainly, you can email me, rkanopka@raise.com. Happy to hear from you.
Yeah, you can reply in the chat here on the back end. Should be able to do that. I
Perfect.
believe so. If not, you can go to most of them are coming through YouTube. So if you go to the YouTube page, you can reply there.
Oh, okay, great.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ray.
Thank you.